Ladies, we need to talk. Have you ever been in a relationship where everything seemed great until it wasn't? He started pulling away. The text slowed down. The energy shifted, and deep down you could feel it. He didn't respect you the way he used to. But here's the hard truth. Respect isn't lost in one big moment. It's chipped away over time by the small things you didn't even realize you were doing. And the one reason women lose respect in love, it's because they abandon themselves for the relationship. Let that sink in. Not because you're not pretty enough, not because you're not smart enough, but because somewhere along the line you started making him the center of your world and forgot to keep being the center of your own. This video isn't about blaming you. It's about waking you up. Because when a woman disconnects from her own needs, boundaries, and self-worth, she becomes someone a man may enjoy, but not someone he deeply respects. Today we're going to break down 7 specific behaviors that cause this shift, and most importantly, how to stop them before they cost you your dignity, your confidence, or your peace. So if you've ever felt like you were giving everything and still not getting the love or loyalty you deserve, this is for you. It's time to reclaim your power, raise your standards, and start showing up as a woman who commands respect, not begs for it. Let's get into it. Let's start with the first and most common mistake. Overgiving too soon. You meet a guy. There's chemistry. Conversation flows. Maybe he says all the right things. Maybe you finally feel seen. And before you know it, you're doing everything you can to make him feel special, appreciated, comfortable, and cared for. You're cooking for him, making time for him, even when you're busy, offering emotional support, maybe even spending money or doing favors that go way beyond what's been earned. But here's the issue. When you give too much too early, without seeing if it's reciprocated, you're not being generous, you're overcompensating. You're trying to prove your worth instead of believing in it. And here's what happens next. Every time, instead of thinking, wow, she's amazing, I need to step up, he starts thinking, I don't even have to try. She's already doing the most, whether consciously or subconsciously. Men are wired to value what they have to earn. Not because they're manipulative or selfish, but because effort creates investment. And investment builds value. When a man doesn't have to invest, emotionally, mentally, or even with his time, he doesn't see what you're giving as a gift. He sees it as a given. And when that happens, the respect begins to fade. Not because you're not worthy, but because he never had to show up for you in the first place. It's not about being cold or calculating. It's about having standards. Healthy relationships are built on mutual energy, not one-sided generosity disguised as love. The truth is, if you're always giving and he's always taking, that's not love. That's imbalance. And imbalance leads to resentment, disrespect, and ultimately detachment. Overgiving also sends a subtle message. I don't believe I'm enough without doing extra. That mindset will attract the kind of man who benefits from your overgiving, not the one who values your heart, your mind, and your presence. What should you do instead? Start by observing. Give slowly. Let things unfold naturally. Let a man reveal who he is before you offer all of yourself. You don't need to win him over. He needs to show up for you just as much as you do for him. And if he pulls away when you stop overgiving, good. That means he was only there for what you were doing, not for who you are. You're not a transaction. You're a woman of value. So act like it. That doesn't mean you stop being kind, or thoughtful, or generous. It means you stop offering your best to someone who hasn't earned the privilege of it. Don't give so much that you forget to see what's actually being returned. Because the right man won't let you overextend. He'll meet you in the middle, every time. Let's move on to mistake number 2. Let's talk about something that feels harmless but silently chips away at your value in a man's eyes. Always being available. It starts innocently. He texts. You respond right away. He calls. You pick up, no matter what you're doing. He wants to see you last minute, and suddenly, you're canceling your plans, shifting your schedule, or dropping everything just to be with him. At first, it might feel like you're being thoughtful, supportive, or low maintenance. But in reality, what you're signaling is my time doesn't matter as much as yours. And let me be clear, nothing kills respect faster than that. You're teaching him that access to you is immediate, guaranteed, and unconditional, even if he hasn't earned that kind of priority in your life. When you're always available, you're not being sweet. You're being too easy to reach. too easy to cancel on, too easy to predict, and eventually too easy to take for granted. Now, this doesn't mean you should play games or intentionally ignore someone just to seem unavailable. That's manipulation. But there's a big difference between being responsive and being constantly accessible. When a man knows you'll always answer right away, always say yes, always rearrange your life to accommodate him, he stops seeing you as someone with her own purpose, schedule, and standards. Instead, you become an option he can use when it's convenient, not a woman he respects and prioritizes. You want to be respected. Make it clear that you have a full life. A life filled with passions, goals, routines, and commitments that aren't instantly rearranged for every man who gives you attention. Let him wonder what you're up to. Let him feel the pause between his text and your reply. Let him experience what it feels like to miss you a little. Mystery isn't about being distant. It's about showing that you don't revolve around someone just because you're interested in them. A woman with a full life isn't intimidating. She's intriguing. She doesn't rush to respond. She doesn't rearrange everything to meet last minute. She communicates, but on her time. She shows care, but with boundaries. And she protects her peace before anything else. That's not being high maintenance. That's being high value. If a man is genuinely interested in you, your occasional unavailability won't scare him off. It'll actually draw him closer. Why? Because now he has to put in some effort. He has to plan. He has to prioritize. And that builds investment. So if you've been answering every message in 30 seconds, saying yes to every request, or letting a man think he can drop into your life whenever he pleases, it's time to change the script. Start showing him and yourself that your time is not a free-for-all. Because when you treat your time with value, others will start to as well. Coming up next, a mistake that gives your power away without you even realizing it. Let's keep going. Let's dive into mistake number 3. And it's a big one, letting him set all the rules. Now, this might not sound like something you're doing, but listen closely. It shows up subtly. Maybe he decides when you talk, when you hang out, how fast or slow the relationship moves. He chooses whether the relationship has labels or stays casual. He makes plans last minute and expects you to follow. He sets emotional boundaries or avoids them, and you go along with it even when it leaves you confused, anxious, or unfulfilled. That's letting him set the rules. And when you do that, you're giving up your voice. You're telling him, you lead and I'll just follow, no matter where you take us. That's not love. That's self-abandonment. The truth is, any relationship where one person makes all the decisions is already unbalanced. It means one person is leading based on what works for them, while the other is shrinking themselves to fit in. And over time, that imbalance doesn't just hurt your confidence, it destroys the respect he has for you. Why? Because people respect those who hold standards, not those who bend to avoid conflict or keep someone around. When you don't speak up, when you don't express what you need, when you keep going along with a dynamic that doesn't feel good, all just to not rock the boat, what you're really doing is handing him the power, hoping he'll use it kindly. But relationships aren't supposed to be about who has the power. They're about partnership. And if you're not showing up as an equal, you're silently telling him, my needs come second to yours. That's not attractive. That's exhausting. And eventually, he will feel it, even if he doesn't say it. So ask yourself, are you expressing your standards? Are you clearly communicating your deal breakers? Are you willing to walk away if something doesn't align? Or are you hoping he'll eventually offer you what you're afraid to ask for? Here's the reality. Men respect women who respect themselves. That means you don't just accept the bare minimum. You don't stay silent when something bothers you. You don't wait and hope. You speak up. You assert. You guide just as much as he does. Letting a man lead isn't the problem. Blindly following is. Healthy leadership in relationships goes both ways. If he can't handle your voice, your needs, or your standards, then he's not leading, he's controlling. And if you feel like you've been walking on eggshells, constantly adjusting yourself to fit his pace, his comfort zone, or his emotional limits, it's time to pause and remember, you're not here to be molded. You're here to be met. You don't need to play by his rules. You're allowed to set your own. And the right man won't resist that. He'll respect the hell out of it. Let's move into mistake number 4. And trust me, this one hits hard. Let's get into mistake 4. And it's one that so many women fall into without realizing it. Avoiding conflict just to keep the peace. You know the feeling. Something he says or does doesn't sit right with you. Maybe he cancels plans last minute, talks over you in a conversation, or disrespects a boundary in a subtle way. You feel it in your gut, that slight sting of disappointment or frustration, but instead of saying something, you brush it off. You tell yourself, it's not worth a fight, or I don't want to seem dramatic. So you stay quiet. You keep the peace, and in doing so you lose a little piece of your voice. Every single time. Here's the truth. Avoiding conflict doesn't create peace. It creates suppressed resentment. You don't speak up, but the feeling doesn't disappear. It lingers, it builds, and it silently shapes how you see him, and even worse, how you see yourself. Because when you constantly silence your truth to make someone else more comfortable, you teach yourself that your feelings don't matter as much as theirs. And here's where the respect starts to erode. Not just from him, but from you. A man cannot respect a woman who doesn't stand for herself. He might enjoy the convenience of your silence, but deep down, he'll sense that you're not showing up fully, that you're filtering yourself just to keep him close. And eventually that dynamic will wear thin, for both of you. Conflict, when handled with maturity, isn't toxic, it's necessary. It's part of intimacy. Real relationships aren't about always agreeing, they're about feeling safe enough to disagree without fear of losing the connection. If you can't bring up your concerns, express your disappointments, or set boundaries without worrying he'll leave, then you're not in a healthy relationship, you're in a silent performance, one that's costing you your authenticity. The irony, the more you avoid conflict, the more conflict you create in the long run. Misunderstandings pile up. Emotional distance grows, and one day the smallest thing will trigger everything you've been holding in. That's when relationships explode. Not because of one fight, but because of the 100 fights that never happened. So ask yourself, what are you afraid will happen if you speak your truth? And what's the cost of not speaking it? A woman who's not afraid of conflict is a woman who knows her worth. She doesn't yell, she doesn't attack, but she does express. She says, this didn't feel good, or I need something different here, or that crossed a line for me. And the right man, he won't punish you for your truth, he'll appreciate it, because emotional honesty is rare and powerful. If you've been biting your tongue to keep him comfortable, it's time to stop. Don't fear conflict, fear a relationship where you're not allowed to fully exist. Next, let's talk about a mistake that erases your identity in the name of love. Now let's talk about mistake number 5. One of the most painful, most common, and yet hardest to notice while it's happening, losing yourself in the relationship. At first it starts small. You start texting him all day, you wait to hear from him before making plans. You skip your usual routines, hobbies, and even friendships, because spending time with him just feels better. You're caught up in the excitement, the connection, the comfort, and before you know it, your world starts to shrink around him. Your goals get quieter, your social circle gets smaller, your alone time disappears. And then one day you look in the mirror and ask yourself, where did I go? This is what happens when love turns into self-abandonment. And while it might feel romantic to give someone all of you, it's actually the fastest way to become unrecognizable to yourself and unattractive to him. Men are drawn to women who have their own lives, their own direction, their own inner fire. When that fire dims and everything becomes about him, the dynamic shifts. What once felt like magnetic independence now starts to feel like emotional dependency, and that creates pressure. He starts feeling responsible for your happiness. You start expecting him to fill the parts of you that used to be full on your own, and slowly the relationship begins to feel heavy. Not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you stop being the version of yourself that he originally fell for, the one who had purpose, presence, and passion outside of him. The truth is, no matter how close you are to someone, you still need space between you to breathe, grow, and remain whole. A healthy relationship isn't two halves becoming one. It's two complete people choosing to walk together. You can love deeply without losing your identity. You can support someone without shrinking your own voice. And you can show up fully without dimming yourself to fit inside someone else's story. So if you've been feeling like you've disappeared into the relationship, like your dreams, your boundaries, your individuality have taken a back seat, this is your sign to come back home to yourself. Reconnect with your routines. Say yes to plans that don't involve him. Revisit the things that made you feel alive before he entered your life. Because a man cannot respect a woman who no longer respects her own path. And when you stop living for yourself, you unknowingly teach him that your world revolves around him. And that kind of power in the wrong hands can lead to complacency or even control. The woman he's drawn to is the one who keeps growing, keeps glowing, and keeps choosing herself, even while choosing him. So don't lose yourself in love. Bring your full self to love. And next, let's talk about a mistake that's harder to recognize, but just as damaging. Let's get into mistake 6, one that far too many women accept because they've been conditioned to tolerate it. Accepting inconsistent behavior. He calls you non-stop for a week, sends good morning texts, plans a date or two, and then suddenly he goes silent. No explanation, no warning, just disappears for days. Then, right when you're pulling back or questioning things, he shows up again. Charming, sweet, like nothing happened. And you let it slide. Again, you tell yourself, maybe he's just busy, or he has a lot going on, or worse, at least he came back. But let's be clear, this pattern isn't random. It's not harmless. It's a form of emotional chaos that chips away at your self-respect. And deep down, it sends a powerful message that you'll accept the bare minimum as long as it's wrapped in occasional affection. Inconsistent behavior is a red flag, not a personality trait. When someone's interest fluctuates without clarity or communication, it's not because they're mysterious or emotionally unavailable. It's because they're choosing not to show up consistently, and you're allowing it. Here's the danger. Every time you excuse inconsistency, you teach yourself to settle for uncertainty. You get addicted to the highs, and you ignore the lows. You start equating unpredictability with passion. But real connection doesn't feel like anxiety. It feels stable, secure, safe. A man who's serious about you doesn't disappear when it's inconvenient. He doesn't go days without reaching out and then act like it's normal. He doesn't make you guess how he feels. Because men value what they're truly invested in. And when someone values you, they don't just tell you, they show up over and over again. Consistency is not too much to ask for. It's the bare minimum. But when you've been stuck in a cycle of mixed signals, it starts to feel like a luxury. That's the trap. You begin lowering your standards so slowly that you don't even notice you're now celebrating crumbs. And here's the truth most people won't say out loud: the longer you tolerate inconsistency, the less he respects you. Not because you're not amazing, but because you've shown him there's no consequence for his behavior. If someone's actions don't match their words, believe the actions. If their effort only shows up when they're bored, lonely, or sensing you're slipping away, that's not love. That's emotional convenience. You deserve consistent energy, not perfect, not overwhelming, just stable and intentional presence. And if someone can't give you that, your job isn't to fix them, it's to choose better. The more you respect your own standards, the faster you filter out people who can't meet them. Inconsistency is a sign, not to wait, not to chase, but to walk away with your dignity intact. Let's move into the final and perhaps most damaging mistake women make, and how to never fall into it again. Now let's talk about the 7th and final mistake that so many women fall into without realizing it: begging for validation. It's exhausting, isn't it? Constantly needing reassurance, asking if he really cares, if you're enough, if he's really into you. You find yourself reading into every text, replaying every conversation, looking for signs that he likes you the way you like him. And when you don't get the answers you want, you try harder, sending more messages, calling more, even changing yourself to fit what you think he wants. But here's the thing. Validation is not something you should have to beg for. When you constantly seek someone else's approval to feel worthy, you're handing over your power. You're saying, "I'm not sure I'm enough unless you say so." And even if he gives you those words, they only temporarily fill the emptiness inside, because true confidence can't come from external approval. It has to come from within. Begging for validation puts you in a vulnerable position. Yes, but not the kind that builds intimacy or respect. It creates imbalance. It makes you look desperate, and desperation kills respect faster than almost anything else. When a man senses that you need his approval to feel good about yourself, he starts to see you less as an equal partner, and more like someone who's emotionally dependent. The reality is, no one can make you feel worthy. Not him, not anyone. That feeling has to come from you. And until you believe you are enough on your own, you'll keep chasing his approval like a never-ending game of catch. This doesn't mean you shouldn't want to feel loved or appreciated. Everyone does. But there's a difference between wanting validation and needing it to feel whole. When you constantly ask, "Do you like me? Do you care about me?" you're unintentionally pushing him away, because confidence is magnetic and neediness is draining. So how do you stop begging for validation? It starts with self-awareness. Notice when you're seeking approval and ask yourself, why do I need this from him? What am I afraid of if I don't get it? Then work on building your own sense of worth. Practice affirmations, pursue your passions, surround yourself with people who uplift you, and most importantly, treat yourself with kindness and respect. When you love yourself first, you become someone who commands respect naturally. You don't have to prove your value. You don't have to beg for attention. You attract it effortlessly because you radiate confidence. Remember, the right man isn't someone you have to convince you're worthy. He already sees it. And if he doesn't, that's his problem, not yours. So stop begging for validation. Start giving it to yourself. You are enough. You always have been. And when you truly believe that, everything changes. We've covered a lot today. And if you're feeling overwhelmed, that's completely normal. Changing how you show up in relationships isn't easy, especially when you've been used to patterns that don't serve you. But here's the truth. Respect is not given, it's commanded. And commanding respect starts with you. Respect begins the moment you decide to value yourself more than you fear losing someone else's approval. It starts when you stop tolerating behavior that diminishes your worth, when you stop overgiving, stop being always available, and stop letting others set the rules for how you're treated. To command respect again, you need to show up as the woman you truly are, confident, clear, and uncompromising in your standards. This means setting boundaries that protect your peace, communicating your needs honestly, and walking away from anything that doesn't align with your values. Remember, commanding respect isn't about controlling others or playing power games. It's about owning your power. When you honor yourself, others naturally follow suit. They mirror the energy you give off. Start by reclaiming your time and energy. Prioritize yourself like you would a precious gem, because that's exactly what you are. When you protect your time, you show people that you're not an option, you're a priority. Next, practice saying no without guilt. Saying no isn't rejection, it's self-respect. It signals that your well-being matters, and that you're not willing to sacrifice yourself for temporary comfort. Most importantly, cultivate your self-worth from within. The woman who knows her value doesn't need constant validation. She stands tall in her own light, and that light is impossible to ignore. You deserve a relationship where respect is mutual, where your presence is cherished, and where your love is met with equal devotion. And the first step to that relationship begins with you choosing to respect yourself fiercely. So stand tall, speak your truth, set your boundaries, and watch as respect, real, unwavering respect, follows naturally. You've got this. You're worthy. And the power to command respect has always been inside you.